Welcome to Wild Spirits Outdoors, the place for real hunting talk, tactics, and a few laughs. Now, let's dive in with your host, Brad Dejon.
All right, everybody, welcome to Wild Spirits Outdoors, episode 1, the inaugural episode. I am excited to be here. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you joined. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, hit all those fancy buttons. Do what you got to do. Spread the word, please. I'm excited to do this, and I'm excited to bring to you some of my story and some great guests going forward. I've got really great guests lined up, and I'm excited to bring them to you. We're going to talk about a lot of different things that have to do with hunting and the outdoor lifestyle. So before we get started with this first episode, I do want to take a minute to thank my wife, thank my friend Steve for helping me put this studio together. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but I'm currently in a sling. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but they were instrumental in helping me get this thing set up. Also, before we get started, because this is the inaugural episode and because you're joining me, I'm excited to do this with you. So if it's past work hours and you got a drink in front of you, raise your glass. Cheers. I got a great little sip of bourbon here. I want to toast the new studio and I want to toast you, the listeners. So cheers, salute. Thanks for joining. All right, let's get into it. So, Wild Spirits Outdoors, where did this idea come from? Now, I've been into the hunting lifestyle for many, many years. I started bow hunting at the age of 12 back in 1995. Going back before that, I was plinking squirrels and chipmunks and rabbits and partridge, chasing frogs around. I've just been in the outdoors basically my whole life. So this first episode, we're just going to kind of go back in time a little bit. We're going to talk about my history, where I started, and then we're going to get into where I'm at now. So bear with me. I do have some show notes here in front of me because I'm by myself. It's very hard to stay on topic, and it's really weird staring into a camera, talking to myself. I also apologize for having the soundboards on the table, but this is episode 1. I want to make sure the audio is good, so I've got everything in front of me in case I need to make some changes on the fly. All right, so 30 years ago, October 1st, 1995, that was my very first archery hunt. Now, I don't know how old my listeners are, but back in 1995, I was 12 years old. There was no sitting with dad in the woods in a box blind. It was, you want to go hunting? All right, get your bow. You shoot, you shoot, you shoot until you can hit a pie plate at 15 paces. Once you can put all your arrows inside of 15 or inside of a pie plate at 15 paces, that's good enough to go hunting. So that's what I did. I practiced, ended up going out. I grew up on a skinny little 10-acre property. I think it's 330 feet wide by it's either a quarter or a half mile deep. I can't remember, but super skinny, super long parcel. And there was an easement running basically right through the middle of it. So every once in a while, cars were coming and going. That's where I got my start bow hunting. My father did not bow hunt. He was a gun hunter. Um, Nobody I really knew bow hunted outside of my Uncle Don. My Uncle Don was low key instrumental in getting me started with bow hunting, and I still thank him for that. As a matter of fact, last season, after one of the best seasons of my life, I had to shoot him a message and remind him that I got my start in this, and he was a big part of that. So, Uncle Don, if you're listening, thank you very much. We're going to talk a little bit not only about my history and then what led me up to here right now, but we're also going to talk about what influenced me in hunting. And one of those things is if you were around for it, man, it was awesome. The mid 90s to early 2000s hunting culture, the TV hunting was phenomenal. Some of the greatest entertainment you could find. TNN Network, the Outdoor Network, I can't remember all the different networks it was on, but some really, really, really great outdoor entertainment was on TV at that time. We're going to talk a little bit about what regulations were like here in West Michigan, where I grew up in the 90s. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that really influenced me and got me fired up. Not only the TV hunting culture, but the infamous Mitch Rompola book had a major impact on my hunting. And we're going to talk about my evolution leading up to where I'm at now. And we'll talk about some highlights from last season. And then we'll talk about what my plans were leading up to this coming season and how this good old injury is going to change my approach going into the 2025 archery season. So, like I said, I started hunting back in 1995. Uh, Probably my first memory with a bow in my hand was at my Uncle Don's house. It was me, my Uncle Don was there, obviously, his wife, my dad, my mom. We're all there. They're having a little get together, and I see my Uncle Don's recurve kind of leaning up against the wall. And he was a pretty hardcore bow hunter, and he could see me eyeing it. So finally he's like, "Hey, you want to shoot that?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So he gives me the bow. We walk out in the yard. He gives me 6 cedar hand-fletched arrows, and he puts me, I don't know, 5, 10 paces away from some straw bales, and he throws a paper plate up there. And I bet you that night I shot, I don't know, 100, arrows into that straw bale. I was just obsessed immediately with the instinctual aspect of drawing that recurve back, the no sight, just looking, anticipating where the shot's going to go, letting it go. I was obsessed. So it really was love at first sight with me. Um, I could not get enough of it. I went home and probably drove my parents nuts for the next, I don't know how many days. I want a bow. When can I get a bow? I want a bow. I want to go bow hunting, blah, 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 blah. Now, mind you, I'm like probably 10, 11 years old at this time. Can't even legally bow hunt at that time. There was no youth season back then. It was the age limits were to archery hunt, you had to be 12 years old, and to gun hunt, you had to be 14 years old. So I just kept bugging him, bugging him, bugging him. And one day my dad comes home and he's got a Bear Archery Whitetail 2 compound bow, single pin. It's got the little flipper rest on it, some XX75s or XX78 aluminum arrows. Guarantee the bow was way too big for me. The draw length was way off. The arrows were probably way too long for me, but that's where I got my start shooting that thing in the yard. And for a bow not my size, I got pretty good with it. So that just kept feeding the fire, feeding the fire, feeding the fire. I'm trying to think when it was. It was probably got that when I was 10 and probably practiced with it. I probably shot, no exaggeration, I probably shot 5,000 arrows out of that thing the first year I had it. If I wasn't in school and I wasn't in sports, I was out shooting that bow, just obsessed with it. And that's when I really started getting into reading about hunting and reading about tracking and learning about that kind of thing. And we had a little gas station by the house. Ferguson's is the name of it, or was the name of it. Um, they had a little VHS rental section in there, and they had a whole section dedicated to hunting VHSs. So I was I was every weekend I was renting the old school Realtree Monster Bucks. I don't even remember what it was called back in the 90s. I don't think it was officially Realtree Monster Bucks till into the 2000s, but I was renting those, and that was the heyday of the hunting media as far as, putting out content on VHS or DVD format. Obviously, there was no DVD then, but everybody was putting out content. So there was some really, really good content out there, and then there was some really, really shitty content out there, but it didn't matter to me. I was renting it and I was eating it up. So, um, what drew me to that was just there was something about archery hunting that really drew me in more so than gun hunting. And I'm not knocking gun hunting. I still do it. I primarily muzzleload hunt when I gun hunt, but I've shot many, many, many deer with my trusty Remington 700 308 chamber. Um, have nothing against gun hunting. It just does not get me as fired up as being 15, 20 yards away from a deer and pulling the old arrow back. So I still love all aspects of hunting, but my true love is in archery. Let me take a little drink here. All right, so now let's fast forward to age 12. This is officially my first year bow hunting. Um, the old whitetail, the old whitetail 2 by Bear Archery was starting to get a little slap happy. It was an old bow when I got it, obviously, and I had shot it so much it was getting a little wonky. And the cams were acting a little weird, if you want to call them cams. They were little tiny wheels. That thing had very little let off. It was a recurve with wheels on the end of it, basically. But so I was having a hard time even hitting a pie plate at like 15 yards. Kept bugging my dad, hey, can I get another bow? Can I get another bow? Uh, my dad's a frugal individual. He's not going to go out and drop a bunch of money on something for some kid who he's like, I don't even know if he's going to continue doing this, right? So he talked to one of his buddies. His buddy had a Browning Fox 2 compound bow. Um, I think the draw weight on it was 55 or 60 pounds. Um, I don't remember if it was adjustable, but he ended up buying that. We actually took it to a local pro shop. They were able to make whatever adjustments could be made to get the draw length close enough for me. I was still shooting 3-finger tabs at the time, and we got some brand new. I think they were XX75s. I'm pretty confident they were XX75s. They weren't the 78s yet. Um, and some, I don't know, 125 grain field points. So I started shooting that, and I got pretty good with that thing. I could consistently keep, a pretty nice group, 4 or 5 inch group at 15 yards. So that was my dad's prerequisite before I could go into the woods. I had to keep everything in a pie plate. Um, every arrow had to land inside that pie plate, and if it did, you were accurate enough to go hunting. So come around September of that year, 95, my dad says, hey, I'm going to call your Uncle Don. He's going to come over. We're going to walk out back. We're going to find a spot for you to hunt. So, again, mind you, this is a super skinny, long 10-acre plot. So, we don't have a lot of room out there, and it's all hardwood. It's a mix of oak and maple, a little bit of pine, but um, it's all high ground. There's no elevation changes really. Right at the very front, not far behind the house, was really the only elevation change, and there was a pretty decent ridge that kind of came to a point right at my folks' property. Obviously, at 12 years old, that meant nothing to me. But ultimately, when my uncle Don came over, we walked the perimeter of the entire property, and we ended up coming right back, probably I don't know, 150, 200 yards behind the garage behind the house. So not very far from the house at all. But at that particular spot is where that ridge came down to a point, and also where that ridge came down to a point years ago, something had fallen on the fence. Uh, there's a barbed wire fence that goes all the way around this property. So something had fallen on that barbed wire fence many years ago. It took out one of the posts, bent it right over in half, and it snapped the barbed wire, and it created a 6, 8 foot opening in the fence. My uncle Don saw that and said, "This is a great pinch point." So I don't know no different. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is where we're gonna hunt, I guess. So he literally walks into that opening. He looks at the property, my folks' property, and he walks 20 yards in, and he looks around, and then he turns to his right and he walks perpendicular to that about 15 steps, 13, 15 steps. And there's an old oak tree, and right at the base, it splits like this. So it's a nice V, but the V starts right at the very bottom of this tree. And that's where we built the blind. So we took, deadfall, we built this squirrel's nest on the ground right between this V. So I would come in from the back, sit down. I got this V, that's my shooting lane, and I'm surrounded by brush. Uh, 13, 15 paces in front of that, there's an old deadfall laying down. And my Uncle Don says, okay, right in front of this deadfall, we're going to put some carrots, some corn, whatever, right behind it, actually, so that when deer come in, they're feeding, their heads behind that deadfall, they won't see you move. You can draw and shoot. So that was my first hunting blind right there. And I hunted that thing religiously. If I wasn't in school, like I said, if I wasn't in sports, I was in the woods. So every weekend, guaranteed. I was hunting mornings. I would hunt as long as my 12-year-old body could stand it before I'd get too twitchy and have to go inside. And then I was back out there in the afternoon. Um, I hunted hard. That first year, I screwed up so many times I can't even count. But the one that really sticks out to me, this is probably mid-October. I'm sitting there. I hear something. I look to my left. Here comes a doe walking in off from the other property. She goes through that little opening. She walks in. She dips her head behind that deadfall, just like my Uncle Donnie said she would do. I drew my bow back and I let that arrow go. And I smoked her. Watched her run off. Never heard her drop. Just listened to her run until she was completely out of sight. I sat there for what I thought was an hour. I probably sat there for maybe 5 minutes before I got up and probably sprinted 100, 200 yards back to the house. I'm busting in the door. I shot one. I shot one. I shot one. So, my dad knows, how long he hunts. So it's not like he doesn't understand, but he doesn't bow hunt. But he's like, how long ago did you shoot it? I'm like, half hour ago. So in his mind, he's like, okay, 5 minutes ago. And he's like, okay, where did you hit it? And I'm like, I don't know, but I know I smoked it. And he's like, all right. So he made me wait like an hour, and I was going nuts. And long story short, after an hour, we go walking out there, and we walked up to where the deer was standing, and you can see where she was standing. You can see where she took off like a bat out of hell, right? No blood at all. So we start following the disruptions in the leaves, and that doesn't last very long before you really can't see the disruptions anymore. And my dad keeps looking for blood, and he's like, "There is no blood. I can't find any blood here." He's like, "Are you sure you hit her?" And I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, and he's thinking, there's no arrow. He had to have hit this deer, right? So we started doing some loops, some loops, some loops. Couldn't find anything, couldn't find anything, couldn't find anything. Now it's almost dark. Um, Neighbor guy that owned property behind us, he was a bow hunter too. He happens to drive by. He sees our flashlights. He knows that was my first year hunting. He was talking to my dad about it. So when he sees the lights as he's driving down that easement, he stops, he gets out, and he comes walking up there, and he's like, "So did you get one?" And obviously, I'm smoking them, right? So I'm like, "Yeah, I smoked one." So he starts helping look for blood, and he goes all the way back to the beginning, and he's like, "All right, slow it down. Where was she standing? What did she do when you shot?" And I'm like, "Well, I drew back, shot, and she just took off like a bullet." So he starts looking around the point of impact, and he's like, "There's no hair here at all." And obviously, usually when you hit one with a bow, there's typically some hair at the point of impact because you're hitting them with a razor blade, right? So you're shaving the hair off. So he starts doing little tiny loops around where she was standing, and then all of a sudden he stops and he's shining his flashlight. Like I said, it's pretty much dark now, so he's shining his flashlight, and all of a sudden he goes, "Found your arrow." And I go running up there expecting to see this blood-soaked Easton, and come to find out, I actually shot about 10 feet in front of where I was sitting. I literally drew the bow back, and I was so focused on that deer, I never even brought my sight up. I just drew the bow back and basically let it go, and it was just buried my arrow 10 feet in front of where I was at. So that was my first experience actually releasing an arrow at a deer, and I was fired up still, and I just kept going, and I never got another chance that whole year. So, like I said, this is like mid-October, and I hunted hard all the way through the end of season, and I never got another chance to shoot a deer. So, what I will say about that is, yes, I was hunting over bait. I have no problem with people hunting over bait. I don't do it anymore, but as a 12-year-old unsupervised in the woods, I probably wouldn't have even seen a deer if I didn't have bait out there. So the bait was something that obviously brought him in, got him close to me, and gave him something to focus on besides me when I was trying to shoot him and still couldn't get it done. So um, we'll talk about that maybe a little more in another episode. But so yeah. All right, now let's fast forward to 99 or 1996. I'm 13 now, and I've been shooting a lot. Uh, the Browning Fox 2 is pretty much worn out. I mean, I'm shooting I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm probably shooting 100 arrows a day. Like, I'm just obsessed with it. I'm shooting all the time. Uh, that bow starts having issues just because it's getting worn out, right? So my dad says, "All right, obviously you're liking this. You're gonna stick with it. Seems so. Let's go to an archery shop. Let's get you set up with a new bow." So we uh, we went to a place in Muskegon, Michigan. I think it was called Springs back then. I don't think they're in business anymore, but they were a Hoyt dealer. So I don't even remember the model of Hoyt that I had, but whatever it wasn't the flagship model for '96, but it was like the mid tier model, and it was a nice bow. But ended up getting all set up. He actually sized it to me, got the draw weight proper to me, got the arrows cut to my size. Got me off of, I think I was shooting 150 grain broadheads that first year. He knocked me down to some 100 grain muzzies, and I was driving darts during practice with that bow. I would shoot constantly. I was shooting those judo heads back then. I would take that bow small game hunting. I would shoot chipmunks, squirrels, partridge, rabbits. I would any animal that walked in front of me if I had that bow in my hand. Besides people's pets, was a marked animal. So I shot that thing a lot, and I was pretty damn good with it. Um, I'd shoot tennis balls. I'd shoot targets. I was always trying to Robin Hood. And matter of fact, age 13 was the first time I actually did a Robin Hood on an arrow. I had that arrow for many, many years. I don't know what happened to it, but I wish I still had it because that was a great memory doing my first Robin Hood. So, anyway, fast forward to October 13th of that year. Um, a doe and some yearlings came in, and they slipped up. They walked in. I was able to get my bow back. I was able to get a pin on it, and boom, shot my first deer. October 13th, 1996. Actually hit it this time, and it did not go far. I think it died inside of 20 yards. Actually, it was a small deer. It was probably a year and a half old doe, but to me that was a Boone and Crockett buck, and I was definitely hooked after that. I was hooked on shooting before that, but after that I was hooked on hunting. So that's where I really got my start and what really lit the fire under me for archery, um, and archery hunting. So I talked a little bit earlier about the '90s hunting culture, and it was awesome. I mean, you had Mossy Oak Hunting the Country was probably my favorite show on TV. You had, like I said, you had the early onset of Realtree monster bugs. I don't remember what it was called back then. You had like I don't know, a 2 hour block of these 30-minute long episodes on, I think it was on TNN at the time, uh, the Nashville Network or whatever it was called. I think it was every Thursday night, prime time basically. You had these shows lined up, and I was obsessed with watching them. Um, just absolutely loved it. Ate it up. Got my introduction to the Drurys, a little bit of Michael Waddell, um, obviously Bill Jordan, Toxie, all those guys. But I was eating that stuff up. Absolutely loved watching that episode, or that block of episodes on TNN, or whatever it became after TNN. And then also on my local channels, we had Fred Trost, Practical Sportsman, and we had Michigan Out of Doors, and that was on every Thursday night. I believe it started at 8 o'clock, and those were great shows too. So between the Thursday night, watching the local stuff, and then going to the prime time and watching the stuff on cable, and then going to the gas station and renting hunting shows. I was doing it all, and I was reading a lot of books, a lot of good information, a lot of bad information. But to me, it was all, it was priceless information. So I was eating that stuff up. Um, and that carried on. We're going to fast forward a little bit here, but that carried on from, 95, 96, all the way through 97, 98, 99, 2000, into the early 2000s. I'm eating this stuff up. Um, and I'm a killer. If it walked in front of me and it was a legal harvest, it was dead If it was a spike and it was legal, it was dead. If it was a doe, it was dead. It did not matter to me. I was running through deer and I was becoming quite proficient at it. Um, and they all excited me. There was never a time where I shot one and I had, shooter's remorse or there was ground shrinkage. That did not exist for me. I was super excited about them all and I ran through them. So, real quick before we go any farther, I want to kind of show you some stuff here that'll kind of show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. So, like I said, my dad, he was a gun hunter. He didn't bow hunt, but you know, I'm gonna lean away from the mic real quick. Now, this is not a giant buck by any means, but I think when I first measured this thing when I was around 14 years old, I think it came in at like 115 inches, something like that. But my dad shot this. I don't know if you can hear this or not, but that's a metal deer tag from Michigan. He shot this in 1963 with a gun. And in 1963, a buck like this in Michigan was something to be talked about. So this was a pretty popular buck back in '63. Um, this was on a full mount, or not a full mount, but a shoulder mount for many, many years. And obviously, with it now being whatever 62 years old, I think about 8 years ago, the mount really started to deteriorate. So I pulled the rack off it, and I intend to get this mounted again to hang with some of my other deer. But this was always an inspiration to me, seeing this buck. I always envisioned shooting something like this myself. Set that down. Yeah, this buck here, this giant right here, this was what I'm going to call my first racked buck. Now, I had shot spikes, I'd shot some little dink 3 pointers, nothing that ever really split, but I believe I was 15 years old, maybe 16. I can't remember the year. I can remember the hunt, but this was out of that same little brush blind on the ground there. I had shot this one with my bow and arrow. So you can see how I went from everything's dead. My first, what I thought was a giant buck at the time, super stoked about it. And then you go from that. Now let's fast forward to probably early 20s. This was actually my first public land buck. I went in and I walked way into the middle of a swamp. Found some little, let's call them ridges. They're not really ridges, but there were some high points in the swamp where you could see deer were, instead of cutting through the water, they were cutting through these high points. And I found two of them that came to a point, and I set up on those the very first time in. I shot this guy, and I saw this side of him. That's all I saw, and took the shot, and he went down about 60 yards from where I shot him. And I was super stoked about this guy. Now, I know it's not a big rack, but this thing's got some weight, it's got some decent mass, and that just kept getting me fired up. Now I know the camera doesn't pan, but if you look over here, it's my first almost Pope and Young buck that I shot with a bow and arrow. I think that one came in at 116 inches. Uh, and again, just got me super fired up. I shot that one on a neighboring property to my parents' 10 acres. I can't remember. It was 2007 maybe. So now you go from that, and then you look over here, and I don't know if it's even in frame or not, but this guy right here, yeah, he's on frame. So this was my first experience of an out of state hunt. In 2008, a buddy of mine, well, in 2006, a buddy of mine kept bugging me to go on an out of state hunt, go to Illinois and go hunting with him. He kept telling me it's going to be an awesome time. And he'd been down there and he'd shot some nice deer. Now, this wasn't like you know, at the time it wasn't a true outfitter. It was a farmer that he had met. They got along well, and basically pay the farmer. I don't remember what it was, $1,200, $1,500. He could come hunt his property for 5 days, and he had quite a bit of property. So um, I couldn't justify spending that kind of money. In 2007, he said, "All right, why don't you come down with me this year? You can sit with me. We'll do some double sets, and you can film for me." So I went down in '07. I filmed for him. I saw my first like 180-inch deer, and I was like, okay, now I get why you're paying to go to Illinois and hunt. So next year, I decided to do the same. I went down there. Uh, First day I was down there, I think it was 11 o'clock in the morning. I went out to find a spot to hang a stand. I jumped like a 140-inch 8 point out of a finger that came down into a couple of fields and then connected to another finger that led down a little, creek draw. And I said, this is as good a spot as any. So I went in there basically 20 yards from where that buck was bedded. I put a stand up. I went back in, sat in the stand at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 1:20, this guy walked by me at 27 yards, and the rest is history on that. And that was my first buck, um, I guess you could call it. And I was about in tears. I was calling everybody I knew. I was calling my dad. I was calling my uncle. I was telling them all what had happened. This buck actually scored out at, I believe, 166 and 4/8. Um, it's the only buck I've ever put in the book. It's in the Pope and Young books. Um, but I could not put him up. Like, to me, this was like shooting a world record. So, and then next to him out of frame, and I'll zoom out when I actually have some guests on so you can see a little bit more of the studio. But next to him is a buck that I'd harvested in Indiana, and then I've left some room on the walls here for uh, the bucks I harvested last year, which we'll talk about here in just a bit. But last year was absolutely uh, one of the most amazing deer seasons I've ever had. Between my hunts in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, it was absolutely phenomenal. Got to experience some really great things and got to harvest three incredible animals. So, super happy with that. So, let's go back again to the late '90s, 2000s era. You know, the hunting regulations in Michigan were a lot different than they are now. There was no crossbow hunting. There was a one buck tag in. I don't remember when that ended, but there was a one buck rule in Michigan at that time. Baiting was legal. It's obviously not anymore. And there was a couple years there in the mid to late '90s. I don't remember how many years exactly, but you couldn't just go buy a doe tag. You actually had to have um, property identification numbers, PIN numbers to parcels showing that you had permission to hunt at least 40 contiguous acres in order to get a doe tag. And there was a quota on those doe tags. So I can remember for sure 2 seasons, and I can't remember if there was more than that or not, but I can remember for sure 2 seasons where these tags were first come, first serve. I think sales on them opened up at 6 a.m. So the only way to get one was to go, get in line at your local, hunting place, pro shop, whatever, gas station, whomever sold tags, get in line, and hopefully you're in line quick enough where you can get one of the tags before the tags are gone. Um, so I can remember for sure 2 years showing up at the local archery shop at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and getting in line and being like 10th, 11th in line, and waiting there until he opened at 6 o'clock, let us in, and then you had to, you know, give them those property numbers and then enter all that in just so you could get a doe tag. Um, so things have changed tremendously. Um, we can talk a little bit more about the current state of regulations in another episode. There's things I like, there's things I don't like, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I just wanted to kind of remind people who were there, and for those that weren't there, just let them know, hunting was a different world. And I'm sure for the guys that were there even before that, it was a much different world as well. Kind of like my dad and this buck he shot in '63. He just didn't see that kind of thing back then. But it's uh, it's changed tremendously since then. And the hunting, some can say it's worse, some can say it's better. I'm just going to say it's different. The hunting is different. 30 years later than it was back then. But there's still a lot of great opportunities to be had out there. Gotta wipe something off my mic here. Take a quick drink. Bear with me. All right. So in 1998, something in Michigan happened that kind of set the archery hunting world on fire. Um, a lot of you probably already know where I'm going with this. It's the Mitch Rompola quote buck controversy. Um, whether you believe he did it, whether you don't believe it, doesn't really matter for this conversation. What I can tell you is it practically immediately put Mitch Rompola in legend status to me. I was obsessed with it. And not only because of what he did, but because of the fact that I'm like, wow, a guy in northern Michigan hunting the same kind of property I hunt can harvest a world record class deer. It just blew my mind. And seeing it in magazines and watching the interviews and all that stuff just further solidified my obsession with hunting. So um, I couldn't not talk about that because, again, whether you believe it happened, whether it's legit or not, it did not matter to me. In 1998, um, as far as I was concerned, as it was the gospel, and um, I was. It made me convinced that if it can happen to somebody like him, in a state like Michigan where I was hunting at the time, it could happen to somebody like me. Now, I tend to personally still believe that, the buck is authentic. Um, I do believe that Mitch Rompola is probably one hell of a hunter, just based on listening to some of the stuff he's talked about and seeing some of the caliber of deer he shot. It doesn't mean I agree with everything the man's done. I personally think that that was a pretty legit deer, and we can leave that for another episode. But in that point in time in my life, it did not matter. That was legit, and it just drove my urge to chase after these bigger deer. So now we've kind of talked. We've taken it from the age of 12, and we've got it all the way up through now. We went all the way into 2008, all the way up into the present with some of the deer I've shot. But we kind of touched on some high points: 12, 13, 15 years old, early 2000s, and then mid 2000s. So uh, probably after I shot this buck here in Illinois, it's kind of when the flip switched a little bit for me. Um, and again, I'm never going to be the one that's going to talk down to anybody for shooting something that gets them excited. The only thing I will ever say is don't ever shoot something and then make an excuse for why you shot it. Um, if you're going to shoot it, you're going to be excited about it when you go up and walk up on it. That's awesome. Be excited for it, but say it with your chest. And if you're going to go out and post it on social media or brag about it, uh, do it with no remorse. As long as it's a legal, ethical harvest, um, and it got you excited, be proud of it. Now, I had shot a lot of deer from the age of 13 till present, and if we back it up, probably about mm, 10, 15 years is when things started to switch for me. I wouldn't get as fired up when a little basket rack walked in front of me. um, I wouldn't get super excited when a doe walked in front of me or a 3 point. So, and that's not to say that those deer still didn't get me fired up. They did. I was excited to see them, but I had shot so many does and so many you know basket racks that it wasn't firing me up anymore. And obviously, and I'm not gonna lie, I was definitely influenced by a lot of the stuff I was seeing on TV and on these shows, right? You want to shoot these monster deer. Well, you know, like it or not, if you do want to shoot one of these deer, when you shoot them at this age, they're not going to get any bigger, right? So if that's what you want to do, you got to be able to, you got to be willing to let that guy walk, and you got to let him walk from that until he's this, and then maybe he becomes this, and maybe this is your target, or if this isn't your target, maybe you got to let him go another year, right? So, um, my selectivity, as far as what I'm going to harvest, is going to change dramatically based on where I'm hunting. If I'm hunting in Pike County, Illinois, A buck like the one my dad shot in '63, I'm not even going to bat an eye at. If I'm hunting public land here in Michigan today and a buck like that walks in front of me, he's going to get me fired up. So there's an arrow going to get let loose if he gives me the opportunity. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, on public land, I only chase, Pope and Young quality deer. Doesn't matter to me if it's Pope and Young. If it's a caliber deer on public land that gets me fired up, I'm going to let the arrow go. If I'm hunting in Ohio, uh, something like that on public land, probably going to get a pass from me. And I might regret it at the end of the week or however long I'm down there. But I know the caliber of deer down there. I've been hunting in Ohio for several years, and I've seen some really great quality deer down there, and I've harvested some really nice deer down there. So it's all going to depend on where I'm hunting. If it's public land, private land, what the pressure's like, what time of season it is. I go to Ohio every year for a late season muzzleload hunt. Uh, it's more of a time of camaraderie with a couple of my really good buddies, but that opportunity still exists to harvest some nice deer. So, depending on where I'm at and the type of property I'm hunting, what the pressure's like, my taste buds can change. And something like my dad's buck that would get me super excited on public land here in Michigan, uh, in Ohio is probably going to get a walk from me. So that's just how my evolution in the sport has gone. I still love the aspect of it. I love getting close to them. I find myself more and more as the years come, love filming them, taking pictures of them, unless they really get me fired up. Then that killer instinct kicks in. But that's how my evolution has gone, and I'm sure several people that are listening to this out there can relate. Uh, just remember, if it gets you excited and you know gets that heart thumping and gets that adrenaline going and gets that trigger finger itchy, don't be afraid to take that shot and keep taking that shot until that deer no longer excites you. And that deer might excite you for the rest of your life, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you might find a time where that 110 100-inch 115-inch deer on private land doesn't get you as excited. Doesn't mean it's not special to you. It just means that you have evolved to a different type of hunter, a different level of hunting for yourself personally, and now you're looking for something else. I can I can let a 115-inch deer walk on my private land in Michigan, and take the chance on that deer getting shot by somebody else, but do it comfortably because I know the next year he could be a 130, 140-inch deer, right? So that's how my evolution has gone, and that's kind of what's developed and grown my philosophy um, over the years. I enjoy trying to age these deer on the hoof in front of me. I enjoy watching more of the interactions some of these younger bucks have with one another. It teaches you a lot about these deer and about their habits and their activities. Uh, choosing to pass them younger bucks, is somebody else going to shoot it? Maybe. But again, if I shoot it, it's definitely not going to live uh, past that year. So that's just a choice I make. Um, After 30 years of hunting, I definitely hunt with more intention now. I would love to, and there may be one out there, but I would love to make a poster or a chart of the evolution of my hunting life because I truly believe it probably falls in line with many people out there. When you're first out there and you're first hunting, uh, you know, a fawn walks in front of you and you lose your shit, right? You're shaking uncontrollably. You can't keep control of yourself. And then a couple years later, you're able to calm it down enough to draw that bow back, make that shot, harvest that deer. And then after that, it's just you kind of become you know, especially, and I'm not going to say this isn't true for women, but for guys, young men, when they're hitting that age, they're already, the testosterone is starting to surge, the aggression is surging, and that opportunity to just become a stone cold killer really flourishes. And if you don't like that, sorry, but that's just the way it is. So, um, like I said, from 13 until 19, 20, I was killing a lot of deer. If I had a tag and it was legal, it was getting shot, and I don't apologize for it, and I don't wish it went any different because I learned a lot about arrow placement. I learned a lot about shot trajectory. I made a lot of mistakes back then, um, and it's just done nothing but made me a better hunter. I think if I'd have went out and shot a giant buck at 12 years old, I don't even know if I'd still be as into hunting as I am now. It's that instant gratification aspect of it. It was a grind, and it was just running through deer until those deer didn't get me as excited anymore. And then it was to the next quote caliber deer until that didn't get me excited anymore. And now it's on to what I'm at right now. And maybe that'll change again, or maybe I'll stay where I'm at. I don't know, but I'm happy with where I'm at, and I don't want to change anything that's ever happened because I think it's just done nothing but made me grow as a hunter and as a woodsman. So that kind of gets you caught up to a little bit of my history. I want to talk a little bit about last year because again, last year was one of the most amazing deer seasons I've ever had. So I've got almost 60 acres. I think it's 59 and a half acres of private land that we purchased back in 2017. I've been doing habitat improvement on it. That property was really rough and feral when I first bought it. It's a great mix of hardwood, swamp, pines, oaks, maples. There's a creek running through it. There's kind of an hourglass shaped swamp that kind of goes from one corner to the other. So it's got a great mix, but again, it was quite feral. So uh, part of my evolution in hunting has been not only just the caliber of deer I want are different, but um, the herd. I want to improve the herd quality. I want to improve habitat so does have better places to fawn. I want to improve habitat so bucks have better places to hide. It's no secret in Michigan. There's a lot of small parcels. A lot of the state private land is chunked up into, let's call it 10 to 40 acres are pretty popular chunks here in Michigan. So come gun season, you might have 20 people within I don't know, half mile, realistically. Maybe less, maybe more. I don't know. All out there with a gun. And when the bullets start flying, those deer they're in panic mode. So part of what's gotten me excited about having that property is creating sanctuaries where these deer can go and not have bullets flying over their back and not feel the pressure of deer drives, and they can just hunker down and ride that thing out. So um, I've been doing a lot of work on the property. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done the wrong thing a lot of times, and I've done the right thing wrong a lot of times. But I've gotten better over the years, and the past 3 years have really started to pay dividends. So um, last year on that property, I think I hunted 3 times, and on my third sit, I harvested a really, really nice 8 point. He's probably pretty close to that 120 range. I didn't measure him. He got me fired up. Like I said, if it gets you fired up, say it with your chest. Super excited with that deer. One of my favorite things about him is he's got a double throat patch, and I've never harvested a double throat patch before. So um, to watch him come in and watch how the plan went. I had a particular point, um, a ridge that kind of pointed down into the swamp on my property. And every year since I've owned that property, that's always been a place where bucks tended to bed, was on that little ridge point knob looking down into that swamp. Um, and it's a tough spot to hunt because really any wind outside of a southwest wind, they're going to bust my access coming in. But uh, prior to last season, I went in and I did a lot of work creating an access to get into a particular spot about 140 yards away from that point. And the only way I could hunt that, or not hunt that deer, but hunt anything that was potentially bedded on that point, was with a southwest wind. And we get those once in a while, but it was late October. It wasn't quite Halloween. I think it was maybe the weekend prior to Halloween. We got a southwest wind last year. My access worked flawlessly. I snuck in there. I got in my stand. Um, I kept telling myself the whole time walking in, there's a buck bedded on that point, because every time there was a southwest wind, there was always a buck bedded on that point. So got into the stand. I waited about 15 minutes, and like I said, it was I think the weekend before Halloween. So after being in the stand about 15 minutes, I did a little rattling sequence, a little bit of grunting, and it wasn't 5 minutes later, right up off of that point came this buck. He came out 60 yards in front of me, browsed around a little bit, postured up, and then he worked and made a beeline right to where I was sitting and worked a scrape 5 yards from me. Um, just kind of showing off for whatever he thought that fight was going on. He wanted to make sure everybody knew he was there. And after he worked that scrape, he turned, he walked 12 yards broadside and drilled him. Down he went. So he'll be on the wall here as soon as I get him back from the taxidermist. So super excited about that. Um, and then let's fast forward into November of last year. On my personal property, I'm not going to harvest more than one buck out there a season. So my season was done on that property as far as buck harvest went. Um, there's a lot of public land here in Michigan, so I started doing some scouting using Onyx and just looking for spots that I thought might be overlooked. And I found a spot. It looked interesting on the map. I drove out there, did some scouting. A buddy of mine came out. We decided to hunt that night. He hunted about a quarter mile from where that spot was, and then I went about a quarter mile south of that spot and hunted. Didn't see much, uh, but I kept looking at my map and I kept saying, "Man, why am I a quarter mile from this spot? That's the spot I need to be." So I think it was the following week. I said to myself, "All right, let's go in there. Your gut's telling you got to be in there." So I went in there. It was about almost a mile in off the access. Never been in there before. Walked in, had my saddle set up with me. Looked around, found what I thought was going to be a nice point for transition. Was going to bring a couple of different trails together. Uh, I went up about 12, 15 feet up into a tree that had a nice crotch in it, nestled down in there, and right before dark, had a handful of deer come in, and then in come a beautiful 9 point, and he came in at I think it was 24 yards, and put a great shot on him, and he dropped I think 40 yards from impact, and that was all the great part. And then the shitty part about that hunt was it was a mile drag to get that deer out of there. I didn't have a sled. I didn't have a cart. For some reason, in my boneheadedness, I thought it would not be that big of a deal to drag that deer a mile. But a lot of prickers, a lot of elevation changes, and it sucked. So thankfully, my brother-in-law came out and we took turns dragging that thing, got it out of there. But that was a fantastic hunt. That was one of the most memorable hunts I've ever had. Just having that opportunity to go in and do a hang and bang and just have it all come together like that did was awesome. So he's also at the taxidermist, and he's going to be mounting here in the studio when I get him back. Then late November, I had an opportunity to go down to Ohio and hunt some private land in southern Ohio. Um, didn't really know what to expect, but seen some trail cam pictures, knew there was some great deer in there. My brother-in-law, on a whim, I called him up, said, "Hey, you interested in coming?" I travel a lot for my primary job, so I get a lot of hotel points. Said, "Hey, I got a free room. All we got to do is, pay to get on the property. It's a self-guided deal. So, what do you think?" He said, "Yeah, let's do it." So we go down there, and first sit in, first morning of the hunt. Uh, as I'm walking into this spot that I'm going to set up in, I hear the most brutal buck fight I've ever heard in my life. I mean, the noises they were making was honestly scary. It was just grunting and snorting and pushing and dragging and slamming together. And this is all happening before daylight. And I'm just sitting there like, wow, I can't believe I'm witnessing this. I can't see it, but I can hear it, and it's close. And didn't last long. It was maybe 15 seconds. And then, they finally separated and they could hear one kind of go one way and then one slowly walked off the other way. Um, got into where I wanted to go, got set up, and then about 11 o'clock in the morning, this beautiful, really, really nice buck walks in, and he's dogging a doe. And he come into 12 yards, and I drilled him. He went 45 yards piled up, and waited half hour. Knew he was dead because I could see him from the stand. Climbed down, walked over to him, and sure enough, he was most definitely one of the bucks that I heard in that fight, because he had a giant black eye on his right side, all swelled up, swelled shut, and he just looked like he'd been, just a warrior. So um, he's a beautiful deer. I can't wait to get him back. He's going to proudly hang probably right behind me next to the flag here. That's one of the coolest hunts I've ever had, and the taxidermist is going to do a phenomenal job making sure they recreate what his eye looks like, because uh, to see that in real time, to hear it in real time, and then to see the effects of that fight was really amazing. So um, last year was a phenomenal season for me. I don't know if I'll ever touch a year like that again, but had a blast. And then because I harvested one with my bow in Ohio in November, that kind of changed my plans for my late season muzzleload hunt that I go on every year with a couple of my buddies, my brother-in-law and another friend. Um, Ohio's a one buck state, so I had the choice of going down to muzzleload hunt and hunt for does, or I could try something different. So because we hunt very, very far south in Ohio, I was not very far from the state of Kentucky, so I elected to buy a Kentucky archery tag. While my buddies hunted in Ohio, I would drive, the extra hour or so down to Kentucky, and I would hunt Kentucky. Now, I don't know if anybody that's listening to this is from around northern Kentucky, southern Ohio, but that muzzleload season last year or early this year, it's in January, January 25, also happened to coincide with one hell of a snowstorm down through that northern Kentucky, southern Ohio belt there. And I think we got about 16 inches of snow. So it made the hunting tough, but it also made opportunities for me to try some or not spot and stalk, but some still hunting down through some draws. So um, wasn't successful harvesting one in Kentucky, but I did have an opportunity to do some still hunting and at least get my eyes on some nice bucks. I think the closest I got to one was probably within 40 yards, but just had no shot before he busted me. But it was a great learning experience, and definitely put Kentucky back on the map for me, and I'm excited to get back down there. My plan was actually to go down to Kentucky and bow hunt this year, but uh, with what's going on with my arm, unfortunately, my 2025 bow season is probably finished off. So talk about that a little bit here. So. Uh, about a week and a half ago, I was picking something up off the ground. Wasn't terribly heavy. I go to the gym quite regularly, so I consider myself to be a pretty strong person. But this humbled me in a hurry. I picked up maybe 45 pounds off the ground, maybe a little bit more. But as soon as I picked it up, I felt two rubber bands snap in my right arm, and it felt like somebody stuck me with a cattle prod, and my hand just went completely numb. And I dropped what I'd picked up, looked down, and my bicep was no longer down here where it belongs, but it had moved up quite a ways. So went to the emergency room. They looked at it, said, "Yeah, we're pretty confident you tore that tendon." Uh, they gave me a referral to go see an orthopedic surgeon. Went and saw him. He said the same thing. Went and had an MRI done a couple days later. MRI confirmed that I completely tore the tendon that attaches to the radius bone, and well, tomorrow technically this episode airs on Tuesday, so on Wednesday I am going in, and they're going to do surgery to repair that tendon. I want to get it back to 100%. So, uh, you know, bad news is my 2025 archery season is likely done already. There's a slight chance by late November I could be back to being able to draw a bow back, but we're going to take it week by week when that time comes. I'd much rather miss one season than to screw this thing up and miss multiple seasons. I've had a lot of good friends reach out, checking on me because they know I was really excited. This was my 30th bow season coming up, so I was gonna really look to make this one special. Do a handful of out of state hunts and really just soak it in. But life happens. We'll get through this, and it's put some perspective on things. It's reminding me that I'm human. It's reminding me that I'm I'm still a young man, I guess, in my eyes and probably in the eyes of many people at 42, but I'm not 20 anymore. So uh, injuries can be major setbacks these days. So um, it really did bum me out when it first happened. Honestly, when it first happened, the first thought that went through my mind was my archery season's over. And that kind of made my wife chuckle. Like, out of all the things you could be worried about, the first thing went through your mind is bow season's over, right? But if you're a hardcore archery hunter and you do something that does not allow you to dry your bow back, you know exactly where I'm coming from. But so it was rough when it first happened. It's probably going to be a little bit rough for me once the surgery actually happens, and then it's real, right? When I can't move that arm for a couple weeks, but again, it's also put things in perspective, and I'm actually excited come this fall to get into some stands, maybe get into some box blinds, and hunt with a camera. I haven't done that really. I mean, I've hunted with cameras, but I always had my bow with me. But to actually go out and really just be able to soak it in, be able to focus in on what's actually going on without turning on the kill trigger, I think is going to be awesome. So I'm excited to do that. I've had some people ask me if I'm going to crossbow hunt, and I'm not an anti-crossbow guy. I personally feel if you're an able-bodied individual, uh, then you shouldn't be hunting with a crossbow during archery season. That might make some people mad. I completely get that. I know it's legal to do so. I think that there's a major difference between a crossbow and even a compound bow. And I know that the traditional guys can say the same thing about a vertical bow, but or about a compound bow. But at the end of the day, whether you're shooting recurve longbow or a compound, you have to draw back, you have to hold that bow. There's a lot of things that have to happen. Whereas with a crossbow, you're basically, it's cocked, locked, ready to rock. And again, I'm not dogging on people that do it. I just personally, I've had people ask me if I'm going to crossbow hunt this year, and I just can't bring myself to do it this year. So crossbows out of the picture until I physically can't draw a bow back. Um, I fully intend to be back to 100% by mid to late November this year, and be back with my vertical bow. So, um, you know, it's a tough one. I guarantee that there's people listening to this that have gone through similar things. Yeah, it is what it is. But we'll come back, like Mr. Joe Dirt said. You just got to keep on keeping on. So that's kind of going to wrap it up. I went through a lot here. I probably rambled on a little bit more about certain things than I intended to. Hopefully, I didn't say or stumble along too much for you guys, but just wanted to give you a history about me. And this episode again is going to be a little bit different for me and for the viewer because it's just me talking to a camera. I'm not used to talking to myself. I'm not used to staring into a camera and talking. I'm excited to get some guests on where we can get some interaction going. But just wanted to let you know a little bit of history about me, how I got into hunting, where I am now in my hunting life, what I've got going on this year, and what I'm looking forward to in the coming years. Next year, as long as this thing heals up good, I'm super excited to be going on an elk archery hunt. Maybe going on a bow hunt for black bear as well. So, a lot of exciting things coming up, a lot of great guests coming up, a lot of great topics to go over. So, thank you, thank you, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed episode 1. I promise you they're only going to get better from here. If you can do me a favor, please subscribe, share, leave a review, hit all those fancy buttons, tell a friend. That's how we're going to grow this. Um, episode 2 is going to come out um, a week from this Tuesday is when it will be released. I will try to release an episode every Tuesday. We're going to dive into some new topics, hoping to have one of my guests lined up for that week as well. So it's going to be fun. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for joining the tribe. This is Wild Spirits Outdoors. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Wild Spirits Outdoors. We appreciate you joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like, follow, and share wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us grow the tribe and keep on chasing the wild. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Wild Spirits Outdoors, and also on YouTube @WildSpiritsPod. You can also head over to www.wildspiritsoutdoors.com for more content. Until next time, chase the wild, feel the spirit,